Welcome to the Clear Admit MBA Admissions Academy. I'm Graham Richmond, and I'm with Alex Brown, and we're going to talk about choosing schools. Alex, tell me about this. How many schools should someone apply to when they're considering business school?
Well, the median is between 5 and 6.
Yeah.
So that's the sort of the target. No doubt at the beginning of the process, candidates are probably looking at 10, 15 schools, but as they go through the cycle and sort of narrow their focus, it's going to fall about 5 or 6 schools.
Okay, and what about, how do I come up with this list? So even if I'm starting with 10 or 15, where am I getting this list from? I know we talked in the past about rankings or your own network, but let's elaborate there. How do you
I mean, we're going to have a lesson specific to rankings, but rankings are a great place to start because it gives you the survey of the landscape of the types of business schools within the top tier and sort of where they sit within those tiers. So I would say rankings, very useful at the very beginning of the research process. And as you say, look at your own networks. Who do you know at MBA schools, and where have they been, and are they in the jobs that you're seeking, and so on and so forth.
Okay. And we will get into rankings in great detail in another lesson in the academy here, but I do think you're right. It's a great place to start. The other thing I was thinking about is geography and you know, things like placements. So if you have an idea of what you want to do after business school, both geography and career placement, often those are intertwined. But what's your take on geography?
Well, they're both very important, geography and placements. They're obviously very much related. At the end of the day, if you know post-MBA you want to be in Silicon Valley, there are certain schools that probably do a better job of getting you to Silicon Valley than other schools. The same if you want to be in New York or Boston, if you want to be in the tech sector or the healthcare industry, whatever it might be. This is a really important sort of factor in terms of deciding which schools to look at. Yeah,
and I want to underline this idea that despite the global nature of these schools, you know, you have schools like Harvard or London Business School, you know, they have these global brands, but we know that the placements and where people land are often quite tied to the geography of the institution. And so I think we cannot underline that enough. It's something that I think people don't fully take into account. So you're absolutely right. If someone wants to be, you know, on the West Coast, then obviously West Coast schools are placing a lot of people on the West Coast. So
not to eliminate. We know that, for example, Wharton has a campus in San Francisco, and we know Harvard really does have a proper global footprint in that regard. But in most cases, I would completely agree. Geography absolutely matters.
Yeah. Now, what about fit and maybe even admissions difficulty? I mean, these are other factors that go into choosing the schools you're going to apply to. So let's start with fit. What is fit, and why would that matter in selecting schools?
Well, fit it's quite difficult to really settle in terms of what do we mean by fit. We always talk about fit being really important, but what does it mean? It essentially means, do you see yourself at the school? Is it an environment that's really you're going to be able to embrace and contribute to and enjoy, and so on and so forth? It might be a function of the sort of learning environment. Is it all case studies? Is it all lecture? Well, no school is all lecture, but I mean, what does the learning environment look like? Is it overly competitive? Some schools have that. There's a perception it's more competitive, and other schools are more collaborative. Although I think some of that is myth rather than the reality. And the more you sort of do your research for each of the schools, you start to really understand what's myth, what is reality. And the only way you can really do that is if you know folks at the schools and you can talk to them sort of one-to-one to get a better understanding. But yeah, fit's an interesting thing, and there are various dynamics to it. Admissions difficulty, sort of, again, if you're looking at rankings as your first sort of order of looking at the types of schools you're applying to, they're often ranked by admissions difficulty. It is, in fact, harder to get into Harvard than it is, for example, to get into Johnson or something like that, right?
Yeah, of course.
But yeah, you want to be smart. You know, if you've already taken your standardized test, you want to see sort of where that fits. Each school will have like a class profile, so you'll see the average GMAT score, the average GRE, the average GPA, and so on and so forth.
Right. And I think, you know, that's actually a good segue into this, another thing that we want to talk about here, which is you typically would have a mix of schools,
Yeah.
right? So if you are, I remember, you were talking about, oh, it's 5 or 6 schools in total, but within that grouping, you're going to have a safety school, some reach schools, and some what we would call target schools,
Yeah.
so middle
Yeah.
ground kind of thing. And I think, again, you can use the rankings to get a feel for that. I will say, and this is an important point, I think you never want to apply somewhere that you wouldn't be perfectly happy to attend.
Yeah.
So when we say safety, it should still be a school that you're excited about and interested in, because there's a lot of time and effort that goes into applying, and you don't want to apply somewhere where you can't.
And the other aspect to that is now the right time to go for your MBA. If you're sort of a little bit earlier in your career, maybe you're considering applying this upcoming season, but maybe in that case you don't need a safety school, because if you're not successful, you're going to come back as a reapplicant, and we know that reapplicants, the admit rates generally is a little bit higher anyway.
Yeah.
So safety school only if you know that this year is the time that you need to go to get the MBA. And the idea about the reach school is, at the end of the day, you might have a really successful admission season. Maybe you went across the board, 5 admits out of 5 applications. Well, that's great. But if you didn't target the top programs within your list, you'll always wonder, would I have gotten into Stanford or Harvard? So reach is really important. Getting that mix, and at the end of the day, it's a successful strategy. If maybe you got denied at 1 or 2 schools, you got 2 or 3 admits within that sort of reach target bracket, fantastic.
Yeah, agreed. And I think the last thing I want to mention, as we go through this lesson on choosing schools, is we often talk about a round by round strategy. And this isn't relevant to all candidates, but I think there are candidates who they may apply to a few schools in the first round, maybe targeting more at the reach end, and then see where the chips fall. And then in the second round, adjust their strategy. They may not, if they haven't gotten in anywhere, they might apply to schools a bit further down the list. Or in some cases, you see the opposite happening. Someone gets in everywhere with money and scholarship dollars, and they say, wait a second, maybe I could go a level up. From there. So any other thoughts on that aspect of this kind of round by round strategy? I know you have some thoughts on who it's not right for.
Yeah. I mean, but the point is, we're very fortunate now that schools release decisions from round 1 before you need to apply in round 2. That wasn't always the case. When I first entered the industry, actually that just wasn't the case. So that's very useful from a strategic standpoint. The question is, should you the schools at the top of your list, should they be in round 1 or should they be in round 2? And there's a couple of factors to consider. One is the learning curve in the application process. Your second set of applications will be stronger because you've just gone through the process of doing it. You understand more about applying. That's going to be a fact. But there are cases where maybe applying in round 1 gives you a little bit of an extra chance in the admissions process. This particularly refers to what we call candidates from overrepresented pools, and we'll have a lesson directly to that point. But there are nuances. There's no right answer for everybody, or no same answer for everybody.
Yeah. So I think what people need to keep in mind here is just that in some cases it can make sense to split your applications across a couple of rounds, but it is very unique to your own situation. And we will get in, as you said, we've got a lesson on overrepresented candidates. And so, but I think this is a great summary of, again, 4 or 5 schools to apply to, maybe 6, narrowing it down using rankings, network, geography, all these things have to come into play as you select your schools. And, obviously we've got a lesson coming up on rankings as well. So there are many more things that are going to go into this, but this is a great start on how to choose which schools you're going to apply to. All right, so next up in the Admissions Academy, we're going to talk about using rankings as part of the school selection process.